Welcome to the Elder Darkness. Tonight we drift into the beginning of the Third Age of Middle-earth. The echoes of battle still linger in the air, mountains stand quiet after the thunder of war, and rivers flow past the ruined lands where the Dark Lord once fell. Imagine walking through the fresh silence after a storm, every leaf trembling, every bird unsure if it should sing again. The world is battered, yet oddly hopeful, like a party that survived an earthquake and is still trying to tidy up the chairs. You will probably fall asleep listening to this story, though somewhere out there, an elf might still be reciting genealogies until sunrise. If you enjoy journeys into Tolkien's world, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Elder Darkness. And since the world is vast, tell us in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Now, lie back and relax as we travel to the world of Middle-earth. Shadows after victory. The Third Age opens with Gondor and Arnor struggling to rule a fragile peace as whispers of darkness linger. The war against Sauron is over. At the very end of the Second Age, armies of elves and men threw themselves against the dark towers of Mordor, and for a time it seemed they had won. The One Ring, that small circle of gold heavy with malice, slipped into the keeping of Isildur, king of Gondor and Arnor. And here already, the Third Age begins not with a triumphant anthem, but with a fateful mistake. Isildur cannot let go of the ring, and though he intends to wield it wisely, or so he tells himself, the river Anduin swallows both him and the treasure. The Dark Lord is defeated, but not destroyed. A shadow lingers, and history, as often happens in Middle-earth, develops a nervous twitch. From this moment onward, the kingdoms of men stand as the bulwark of Middle-earth. Gondor in the south, Arnor in the north. Both are founded by the descendants of Númenor, those proud mariners who once carved empires upon the sea. Their banners still flutter with seabird wings and 7 stars, but their people already know decline. Think of it as a golden apple with just the tiniest brown spot. It looks fine now, but wait a few centuries. In the north, Arnor stretches wide across Eriador, embracing hills, forests, and windswept plains. Elendil, the High King, ruled it first, but his line must now navigate centuries of squabbling. Gondor in the south, richer and more populous, builds great walls, towers, and cities. Its marble reflects sunlight, its fleets patrol the coasts, and its kings carve thrones from stone. To the casual passerby, it looks unshakable. But the Third Age is not an age of triumph. It is an age of slow fading, where victories grow stale, walls crumble, and weeds claim forgotten fields. The elves, those ancient caretakers of beauty, begin to step back. They wander westward, called home by the sea, and their halls in Middle-earth grow quiet. Rivendell remains as a pocket of song and wisdom, and Lothlorien as a lantern among trees, but their numbers dwindle. Middle-earth historians still debate whether this fading was inevitable. Some claim the diminishing of elves was tied to the rings of power, others to the world itself changing shape. Either way, fewer harp notes ring under the stars. Meanwhile, in the south, Gondor shoulders a heavy burden. Its people keep watch over Mordor, setting guards at the Black Gate and fortresses at the Efelduith. Imagine a night watchman standing outside a prison. Even though the cell looks empty, he knows, deep down, that his prisoner may yet return. The effort is exhausting generation after generation. And in the north, Arnor looks toward scattered lands and wonders whether its unity will last. Spoiler, it doesn't. One quirky tidbit here. The early years of the Third Age still featured a fashion craze among Númenorian-descended nobility. Long, embroidered cloaks heavy with sea motifs, Some designs were so exaggerated that, according to one tale, a noble nearly toppled into his own dinner fire because his cloak tassels caught on the spit. If that doesn't say end of empire energy, nothing does. The story presses forward. In time, Gondor and Arnor will find themselves too preoccupied with internal affairs to notice smaller folk wandering quietly in their lands. Hobbits, yes, those curious little beings with hairy feet, begin migrating from the valleys of Anduin into Eriador during this early stretch of the Third Age. No one pays them much attention, just rustic farmers and pipeweed experimenters setting up in the Shire. Yet these overlooked neighbors will eventually reshape the destiny of the whole age. Funny how history sneaks up on itself. But in this first turning of the age, the great stage is set with a kind of uneasy optimism. Gondor gleams, Arnor sprawls, elves still keep counsel, and dwarves return to their mines. The land breathes after centuries of fire, and yet, somewhere in the depths of time, the One Ring waits quietly in the mud of the Anduin, whispering. Its master's will, though bodiless, stirs faintly. This is not a clean beginning, but a fragile pause. The Third Age opens, kingdoms rise, and already the first hints of fading creep in. Decline of the North. Arnor fractures into rival kingdoms, their slow fading marked by petty wars and unseen shadows. Arnor, the northern kingdom, begins its journey with promise. Wide lands stretch from the Blue Mountains to the Misty Mountains, dotted with towns, rivers, and hidden ruins. Elendil's descendants sit upon the throne, claiming the title of High King. But as the centuries roll forward, unity proves slippery. The kingdom, broad and proud, slowly cracks like a clay pot left too long in the sun. The first splinter comes in the form of succession. When a king dies without a clear heir, his sons squabble, and instead of pulling together against their common enemies, they divide the land. Arnor splits into three realms: Arthedain in the west, Cardolan in the south, and Rudor in the east. It is a breakup worthy of a tragic ballad, though perhaps sung with a slightly out-of-tune harp. Each new crown holder insists he is the rightful heir, and none are willing to admit otherwise. The unity that once defined the North slips into dust. The elves look on with mild exasperation. Rivendell, nestled deep in the hidden valley, becomes a sanctuary for what wisdom remains. Elrond hosts councils, preserves scrolls, and tries very hard not to roll his ageless eyes every time another human prince claims supreme legitimacy. Middle-earth historians still debate whether Elrond could have intervened more directly to preserve Arnor, but given his patience already tested by centuries of political bickering, one suspects he preferred tea and silence. Meanwhile, enemies stir. Rudor, weakest of the three kingdoms, falls under the influence of hillmen and, eventually, the shadow of Angmar. Ah yes, Angmar. A realm of cold winds and colder hearts, ruled by a mysterious figure later known only as the Witch King. The same fellow who, much later, earns the dubious honor of being stabbed by a hobbit and a shield maiden. But for now, in the early Third Age, he is the whisper behind armies, the hand that pulls strings in the dark. As the Witch King presses from the northeast, Arnor's fractured states prove easy prey. Arthedain holds out longest, clinging stubbornly to the line of Isildur, but Cardolan and Rudor slip away, swallowed by war and shadow. Ruins multiply across Eriador. Ruined watchtowers, broken bridges, empty halls where once laughter echoed. Travelers pass by stone remnants and mutter about ghosts, though the only ghosts present are the regrets of men who refuse to compromise. And here, tucked into the story of fading glory, we find a curious side note. Hobbits. Their migration into Eriador coincides with Arnor's decline. Some settle near Bree, others push further west into the land that will one day be the Shire. Picture a weary Arnorian soldier trudging home past fields, only to see a family of tiny, barefoot folk planting turnips and debating the merits of pipeweed blends. History often ignores them, but the Hobbit's quiet resilience offers a striking contrast to the self-destructive grandeur of men. It's almost as if Middle-earth itself shrugs and says, "Fine, if the big kingdoms can't handle it, let the small folk have a go." The wars drag on for centuries. Arthedain resists with stubborn courage, fortified by alliances with Rivendell and the Rangers. But time works against them. One battle at Fernost, sometimes called the Battle of the North Downs, sees the final stand of Arthedain's last king. Gondor does send aid. Some brave warriors march north, their shields shining, but they arrive too late to save the kingdom. Arthedain falls, Fernost is sacked, and the Witch King laughs beneath the winter stars. Only Elrond's counsel and the persistence of scattered rangers prevent Angmar from sweeping across all Eriador. Eventually, forces of Gondor, Elves, and surviving Dunedain combine to defeat the Witch King, driving him away. Yet victory comes at a terrible cost. The kingdom of Arnor is gone, reduced to scattered rangers wandering in the wild. Those rangers, though, will matter. Descendants of Isildur, they carry a line that refuses to be snuffed out. They wear weathered cloaks, haunt lonely roads, and occasionally startle tavern-goers who mistake them for highwaymen. One of them, many centuries later, will introduce himself as Strider in the Prancing Pony. But in the long middle stretch of the Third Age, they are simply wanderers in the north, heirs to a crown that no longer has a throne. A curious scholarly debate arises about whether Arnor might have survived had it maintained stronger alliances with the dwarves of Khazad-dûm. The dwarves, after all, were prosperous in this era, delving deep in Moria beneath Durin's crown. Some argue their military support could have tipped the balance. Others note, somewhat sarcastically, that dwarves rarely abandon their vaults of treasure to fight in human quarrels, unless the quarrel involves gold. Perhaps Arnor's fate was sealed not by enemies, but by a lack of friends willing to show up on time. By the time the Witch King vanishes into shadow again, the north lies in ruin. Bree survives, quietly serving ale to weary travelers. The Shire blossoms, its hobbits blissfully unaware of the tragic grandeur that once lay around them. Elves in Rivendell keep watch, sighing often and serving lembas to whichever ranger stumbles in for counsel. And the wide fields of Eriador, once brimming with towns and banners, fall silent. The decline of Arnor becomes one of the great cautionary tales of the Third Age. Unity squandered, strength wasted, enemies unchecked. Yet in this fading lies the seed of future hope. The Rangers, scattered and quiet, keep the ancient line alive. Their presence lingers in shadows, like a memory refusing to die. And somewhere, in the deep dark, the Witch King waits, biding his time until a new age of war summons him forth again. Strength and strain in the south. Gondor flourishes yet falters, challenged by plagues, invasions, and the long watch on Mordor. Far to the south, Gondor stands proud, its banners still high, its white city gleaming in the sun. If Arnor is the cautionary tale of division and decay, Gondor is at first the textbook of endurance and power. Great walls rise, tall towers pierce the sky, and kings sit on their thrones with authority that echoes the glory of Númenor. At its height, Gondor is so mighty that even the rumor of its armies makes neighboring realms think twice about rebellion. And yet, strength has a way of eroding, not suddenly, but slowly, like a river carving away stone. The first centuries of Gondor's rule are filled with confidence. Cities like Osgiliath, Minas Anor, and Minas Ithil gleam with craft and culture. Gondor's fleets patrol the coasts, its generals oversee borders stretching wider than any mortal realm has ever held in Middle-earth. For a time, even the wild Easterlings and the Haradrim in the far south bow under its shadow. To outside eyes, Gondor looks invincible, as though the memory of Númenor itself still fuels its heartbeat. But shadows do not vanish so easily. Mordor lies silent after Sauron's fall, its towers empty, its gates watched by Gondorian garrisons. At first, the silence is reassuring. Over generations, though, people grow careless. Soldiers are pulled from the watch to fight wars elsewhere. Fortresses go unmanned, and the Black Land begins to brood again. It is the classic mistake of thinking the dark basement is empty just because you haven't checked it in a while. Still, Gondor thrives for a while. Kings expand its borders, adding victories to their chronicles. Then the slow unraveling begins. Plagues sweep across the land in the Mid-Third Age, a cruel pestilence that kills thousands. It is said that entire villages vanished overnight, leaving only toppled carts and unopened jars of grain. Even Osgiliath, the mighty capital, suffers terribly. And though cities can be rebuilt, confidence is harder to restore. To make matters worse, enemies take note of Gondor's vulnerability. Easterlings push westward, Haradrim stir, and corsairs from Umbar raid the coasts. Gondor responds with the fury of a wounded lion, and often wins, but each war saps its strength. One quirky tidbit notes that Gondorian scribes during this period became obsessed with recording casualty numbers down to the single digit, which resulted in absurdly precise accounts like 1,462 soldiers fell plus 3 donkeys. It seems bureaucracy, even in Middle-earth, survives every catastrophe. Yet Gondor remains the greatest realm of men, even in decline. Minas Ithil, city of the moon, guards the mountain passes. Minas Anor, city of the sun, gazes westward with bright hope. Osgiliath, spanning the Anduin with its bridges and domes, holds the heart of the kingdom. But evil never sleeps. The Nazgul, those 9 kings ensnared by Sauron's rings, reappear in whispers and rumors. Centuries after Arnor's fall, they come south and seize Minas Ithil. Its white walls are tainted, its towers darkened, and it becomes Minas Morgul, the city of sorcery and dread. Gondor reels, renaming Minas Anor to Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard, for its role now shifts from shining beacon to desperate watchtower. The theft of Minas Ithil changes everything. The Palantir within its walls, one of the great seeing stones, falls into the hands of the enemy. From this moment, Gondor's security weakens further, for Sauron's eyes, through his servants, can twist the very tools that once brought wisdom. Middle-earth historians still debate whether Gondor could have held the city with stronger alliances, or whether the rise of the Nazgul made its loss inevitable. Either way, the transformation of Minas Ithil into Minas Morgul marks a turning point, a visible scar that never fades. Even so, Gondor keeps fighting. The white tree still blooms, its blossoms fragile but persistent, like hope itself. The stewards of Gondor rise when the line of kings falters, keeping the realm alive through sheer stubbornness. Some stewards are wise, others weary, but they preserve Gondor against odds that would flatten lesser realms. One almost imagines them muttering each morning, "Not today, Mordor, not today." This resilience plays out across centuries until we reach the familiar tales of the Lord of the Rings. Gondor, by then, is a shadow of its former glory, but still formidable. Recall the siege of Minas Tirith, when Sauron throws his mightiest assault against its walls. Even battered, even outnumbered, Gondor resists. The beacons flare across the mountains. Rohan rides to aid, and the White City holds. Gondor proves that even a fading realm can blaze fiercely when cornered. And within this story lies a reminder of Osgiliath, once proud, now broken. By the time Frodo and Sam creep through its ruins with Gollum, the city is a shell haunted by orcs and memories. The starlight glimmers on fallen stones, and echoes whisper of a time when kings walked its bridges. One can almost hear the sighs of Gondorian scribes, somewhere in the void, tallying the missing windows. The fate of Gondor in the Third Age is thus one of endurance tested to breaking. Victories fade, plagues wound, enemies press, but still the realm holds. It becomes less a conquering empire and more a watchman, standing at the world's edge, waiting for the storm. And though its might diminishes, its story proves that sometimes survival itself is triumph. The Age of Waiting. Centuries slip by with hobbits emerging, wizards arriving, and the stage being set for Bilbo and Frodo's adventures. Time in the Third Age slips like sand through an hourglass. Centuries blur, kings turn to stewards, and once great halls echo with fewer voices. It is an age of waiting, of slow erosion, and of shadows gathering at the edges. The north lies quiet under wandering rangers, the south strains under endless watch, and in between, unnoticed by nearly everyone, hobbits settle into their gentle rhythm of breakfasts, pipeweed, and birthday parties. The hobbits' arrival in Eriador might have seemed insignificant at first, small folk setting up farms in quiet valleys. Yet their timing is curious. They appear just as the mighty kingdoms falter, as though history decides to slip in a new piece on the board when the old ones tumble. Their settlement of the Shire, granted by the kings of Arthedain, becomes a pocket of peace. Middle-earth historians still debate whether this grant was a clever political move to fill an empty land or simply the result of a king being charmed by second breakfast. Either way, the hobbits thrive, blissfully unaware that their descendants will one day carry the heaviest burdens of the age. Not only hobbits emerge during this long dusk. Strange travelers appear, the Astari, known more casually as the wizards. They arrive not as conquerors but as old men in weathered cloaks, wandering into taverns, muttering about stars, and occasionally setting fireworks off in unsuspecting fields. Their true mission, whispered from the west, is to guide the free peoples against the inevitable return of Sauron. Yet they walk softly, cloaking power in the guise of frailty. Some fall into corruption, like Saruman, whose pride tangles him in webs of envy and machinery. Others, like Gandalf, find strength in humility, delighting in the company of hobbits. A gentle reminder: never underestimate the old guy with the twinkle in his eye and a suspicious number of pipe smoke tricks. Meanwhile, dwarves carve their own stories. Moria, Khazad-dûm, once a glittering kingdom beneath the mountains, falls into ruin when the miners dig too deep and awaken Durin's bane. The Balrog slumbers no more, and the dwarves flee. Their loss adds another echo of sorrow to the Third Age, though they find new homes in Erebor and the Blue Mountains. This decline, however, lays the groundwork for later adventures. When Thorin Oakenshield gathers his company to reclaim Erebor in The Hobbit, the stage has already been prepared by centuries of wandering, exile, and longing for lost halls. The elves continue their quiet withdrawal. Lothlorien glimmers like a dream. Rivendell hums with lore, but more and more ships depart for the west. By the time Frodo passes through their lands, the elves are like fading starlight, still beautiful, still powerful, but already half gone. This slow departure becomes one of the great melancholy threads of the age. The world is changing, and the elves cannot linger forever. But perhaps the most crucial element of this long wait is the persistence of evil. Sauron, thought defeated, begins to stir again. His spirit gathers in the dark woods of Greenwood, corrupting them into Mirkwood. The necromancer's fortress at Dol Guldur rises, and though the wise suspect the truth, it takes centuries before they confirm Sauron's return. The Council of the Wise debates, plans, and finally acts to drive him from Dol Guldur. Yet his retreat is but a feint. He has already turned his gaze back to Mordor, slipping into the land his enemies neglected, rebuilding Barad-dûr, and calling his servants home. And so we reach the familiar moments woven through The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Bilbo's journey to the Lonely Mountain begins almost as a sideshow, a quirky adventure about dragons, riddles, and misplaced pocket handkerchiefs. Yet from that journey comes the rediscovery of the One Ring, lost for millennia in the mud of the Anduin. Gollum hisses in his cave, Bilbo pockets the ring, and history jolts awake. What was once the age of waiting becomes the age of acceleration. Suddenly, every thread begins to tighten. By the time Frodo inherits the ring, the Third Age is staggering toward its end. Gondor, battered yet unbowed, braces for siege. Rohan, still proud horse lords, ride to answer the call. The Rangers of the North step from shadow, their chieftain Aragorn revealed as Isildur's heir. The elves and dwarves take their final turns on the stage. And the hobbits, underestimated by everyone, including themselves, carry the weight of destiny. The long centuries of fading, patience, and neglect all converge in one desperate struggle. The Third Age, defined by decline, ends in a blaze of courage. And then, as the ring is cast into fire, as Sauron finally shatters, the waiting ends. A new age begins, not of fading but of renewal. Yet the Third Age remains a study in contrasts. Kingdoms rise only to crack, heroes emerge from unlikely corners, and even in shadows, hope refuses to die. Now we slow down, soften the cadence, and let the imagery fade like starlight at dawn. The kingdoms of men stand like ancient trees, their branches scarred by storm, yet still they hold against the wind. Elves step quietly into the west, their songs trailing behind like threads of silver in the night. Dwarves close their gates, hobbits return to gardens, and wizards wander on roads that vanish into the mist. The noise of battle still hums in distant memory, but here, in this gentle twilight, the world exhales. The Third Age has been long and weary, but also beautiful. Its ruins moss-covered, its rivers unchanged, its skies full of stars that never tire. Let your own thoughts drift now, as though you walk a lonely path through fields under moonlight. The stones of ancient kingdoms lie around you, but flowers grow between them, softening every edge. Time itself seems slower, each breath deeper, each step lighter. And when at last you reach the quiet hills of the Shire, smoke curling from chimneys, laughter carried faintly on the breeze, you know the journey is safe to end. The shadows have passed, the story rests, and so may you.